Good evening and great games at your table. I'm Jonathan Albin and this is Nikos RPG. I am the GM's Guide and I've been GMing for 50 years and I hope to help you make your games amazing. Tonight we're going to talk about group density dynamics, or in other words, how to handle a humongous crowd. I have been GMing, as I said, for 50 years, and the largest group of players in a given game session that I would argue is a role playing game was 107 players over an 11-hour period in 1992. It was at the Origins Games Convention in San Jose. I believe it was 1992. Could have been 1993. At any rate, we were accommodating 107 players in a role playing environment known as Parallels. And I'll go more into that particular system at a different point. But that is the largest contiguous group that I ran at the same time. And that was with two other sub GMs. And we'll go into more of those details in another video. But generally speaking, I would hazard a guess that most of you that are game masters have accommodated relatively large groups at 5, 6, 8, maybe 10 players. But throughout my career as a game master, I have regularly hosted games at my house and in other locations that have had audiences of 10, 12, 15, 17, even up to 24 players on a regular basis. And this is sort of mind-boggling to most people that it's even possible to do this. And so we're going to be talking about how to do that. Now, if you are interested in information on how to be a great game master and want to improve the games that you're running, make sure you like and subscribe and hit all the buttons down below so that the algorithm will know that you're in our audience, and that way you'll be able to get updates on every new video that we produce. Alrighty, so we are going to go into how to handle these big groups, why to do so, and how to get back out of that mode. Because while it is exciting and thrilling, it is a burden, and it really ultimately is something that should only be done for a short period of time, as I will describe. All right, so we're going to be starting with the idea of how do you start with a large group. Now, most players that I know, and most game masters that I know, when they start a games group, they start small. They pick 2 or 3, 4 critical players and start there. And then as players find out about the games and want to become part of it, they do tend to grow. And even at your most dynamic, most groups still cap out at 6, 7 players, simply because most games are built with the idea that all of the necessary pieces can be accomplished in 4 to 6 players. You don't have to have a larger group to kind of satisfy the itches of game group dynamics with a larger number. So my point is that if you are looking for testing your mettle to see what you're capable of, start with a loaded group, which means have all of the roles filled by at least one player, maybe 2. And generally these can be accommodated by having a person who is a multi-class or has multiple resource limits. Now, when you're talking about a game in a mechanic like Nikos RPG, the class limitations aren't so much there, but the general skills bases that they will want to draw against will have a fairly broad spectrum, so you'll be wanting to get players from a wide variety of different options in terms of what they can accomplish in order to cover all of your bases. My buttons are being temperamental here. Just a second. The second thing you're going to have to be concerned with a large group like this is that you're going to want to definitely have a group of players who are disciplined and patient. When you have a large group, each person is going to be, therefore, necessarily provided shorter shrift in terms of how much time that they're going to have their attention in the game is going to be limited in scope. So we definitely want to find ways to provide the best opportunity for the players, and so the players will, by necessity, have to become disciplined and patient. This has to do with things like talking over one another, providing each other fair chances to make their decisions about what's going on in the game, and to allow each player their moment in the sun, so to speak, so that there is not a overburdening of one player over the others to cause dynamic tension in the games. This is easier with more veteran players, but also more veteran players may be less inclined to give the larger groups the time of day. And all I can tell you in those cases is that when you have a group and you are pushed to the limit by new players being added, realize that there is going to reach a threshold whereby you have to decide to consider culling or changing your player group session over session in order to stay within your own personal capacities. I've been doing this so long, and I've had particular unique experiences that have provided me with an opportunity to be able to do this perhaps a little bit more easily than other people. I'm a former air traffic controller, so the idea of working within a limited time with a maximum audience becomes a part and parcel of how you meter out your time, because you do have to keep track of what is urgent versus what is important within the scene and the setting to make sure that everything that needs to accomplish gets so, and that the players know that they're getting their maximum amount of attention that they can get per person. This also means you have to have pretty effective time management. Now, I'll be perfectly honest, the easiest way to ensure that you have enough time for each of your players is to determine your initiative order early and stay generally within that sequence of players set moment over moment during the game. Now, this is problematic if you're trying to make the game feel dynamic, because simply letting every person act in turn does seem to drag, if you will, when you are looking at a large number of players. So I've come to use sort of a accordion style of player interaction, and that is, as the situation becomes larger with number of players, the system will generally sweep through the group one direction and then in the reverse order back the other direction, so that each player feels like they're getting an equitable amount of time within the scene, and yet will be allowed for that interaction. And the change up tends to help with the idea of randomness in the game. There's a lot of different ways to do this, and I'd love to hear what your ideas are and how you handle your time management within your larger scale groups, because as you get to more and more players, it becomes more problematic. Generally, when I got to the larger groups, like for example, when I had one episode I had was 17 players, I actually sat in a chair like this one that rotated, and I literally would just walk in a circle and say, okay, your turn, your turn, your turn, your turn, your turn, your turn, and just went in a big circle, so that the players could see that I was approaching their turn, and therefore their ideas of what they would be acting on would become fresh in their minds as I got there, so that there wasn't a lot of delay. And that has to do, again, with the discipline of your players. If they are aware of the large group and they know that it's only for a short period of time, they tend to be able to handle this kind of a artificial structurization of the session, simply to make it more acceptable for the large group to deal with. When you have a big group, or even when you have a smaller group, balancing your actions, your dramas, and discoveries session over session and week over week is critical to maintaining player joy. Obviously, each player comes to the table with a different agenda of what they want to accomplish, and while some of them might simply not care and are working on persona development and character improvement over time, and they don't need to particularly feel one way or another about what's going on. Other people have their predilections. They like action, perhaps they like drama more, or they want to be involved in the great discoveries. By playing with a variety of these things balanced week over week, you're able to provide the players with a more enjoyable experience, even with the larger group complement, slowing things down perhaps a little. And now we're going to come to the one of the secrets to large group dynamics, and that is the idea of letting the party break up. Let them actually split the party. I know that sounds like anathema, and most game masters really rue the idea of a group breaking down. But when you have 16, 20, 24 players, it's sometimes best to let them actually break into subsections and work out a problem with only their smaller group. Now I'm going to give you an example of the games group that I had in my house when I was in my mid-20s. My kids were young, less than 3 or 4 years old, but I had between 16 and 24 players on a regular basis coming to my house on Friday nights. And what was really dynamically challenging to it is that I was pulling people from both the military and civilian populations to my house, which was near Norton Air Force Base. And the group segmented itself without my direct guidance, simply because they had different affinities. We had some players who worked night jobs, and so when they would come to the session, they would be pretty tired, and they really wanted to be part of the story, but they also were exhausted, so they would basically lounge around on my living room furniture, most of them napping when they could, which of course was perfectly fine if I had segmented the groups, and so the napping group would be connected or collected together, and then I had a group that were smokers, tobacco smokers, and so they weren't allowed to smoke in the house, and so they would be on my front porch, smoking away on their cigarettes or cigars or whatnot. And I had a third group that were my foodies, and generally they were in the kitchen area. My spouse at the time was supportive of us and would be in there making snacks and cookies and cupcakes and whatnot. And so my foodies would be in there assisting her with those efforts or whatever. And then finally, I had the group of philosophers that were sitting on the back porch who were the brains of the organization, so to speak. They were the veterans of the games group who were really concerned with the meta story. And so they would be developing the plans for what the entire group would do and how they would accomplish it. I, as the game master, would therefore move from segment to segment to segment in about 15-minute group gaps, simply by how long I could stand, standing up, sitting down, moving around. And so therefore I would just do this rotation, moving through the groups, interacting with each group, telling them what's going on, waking up the sleepers if I need to get to a combat action or whatever. And so we would kind of have an accordion kind of effect. In some subsets of the game, we would have almost everybody awake and active, and our big combat scenes were fundamentally small wars as each one handled their portion of the conflict. We had the drama quotient, accommodated by those that were in each group, interacting with the NPCs they ran into, and then conveying that information to the other subgroups. So it was a really effective way of doing it, but we ran 20, 24 players a week for 6, 10, 12 months at a pop before something would happen and a change of cast would occur, or we'd have to move to a new location or whatever. But the dynamic here is that the partitioning of the party into the various groups really made it so that I was running fundamentally 4 and 5 games groups on the same night who were interacting with each other. So it was a precursor to what I'm actually doing now with my games groups, and really allowed me to solidify a lot of the processes, drawing from my air traffic control background and submitting that into the game play environments of our really large games groups. Now, this is where the rubber meets the road in modern play. I've got currently 6 games groups, 2 professional home games groups that are not directly interacting with the other games. I've got 2 sectioned out on Mondays and Tuesdays that are my in-store campaigns. And if you want to be a part of that, the store is Board Game Paradise in Redlands, California. We've always got room for additional players, so if you'd like to come in and join us, we'd love to have you. As a matter of fact, I'd love to blow out the store by having 6 or 8 or 10 of you who don't normally play all come together so we could do one really massive session. We also tend to do a lot of crossover episodes as we have players who migrate from Monday to Tuesday or from Tuesday to Monday or play in both. And it creates quite a hodgepodge, but that allows for the maintenance of continuity as players are carrying the information from game session to game session, so that it makes sense that they are all continuously updated on what's going on in the game. As a matter of fact, one of the things that we are doing in the next 24 hours or so is we're going to be translating all of our weekly updates called the Nikos Nightly News to our Patreon account. And so if you want to know what's going on in the campaign and what's been going on for as long back as we have kept records, you can actually check those out at nikosrpg.patreon. I'm sorry, patreon.com/Nikos, NYCOS. Did that backwards. Patreon.com/Nikos, NYCOS. And that's where you'll be able to get access to those historic episodes. Having said that, the idea of capturing continuity is important so that the players feel like what they're doing is part of the overall story. And the more you're able to allow them to see that continuity, the more likely they're going to be intrigued by even the games groups that are large in size. And this is also why I have developed the Nikos RPG mechanism. We wanted to make a game mechanism that was quick to teach, quick to accomplish and incorporate, and most importantly, a system that allowed the players to pursue their own advancement within the game system, their own progression, so that it's not dependent upon the game master for their permission to advance. And so by having a simple system in place where we can allow for more innovation and more creativity among the player groups, and therefore be able to move through episodic pieces at a much more rapid rate than otherwise normally would be possible. One of the last things you really need to think about, though, is that if you're running a group that is relatively large, try to maintain focus on what is important. With a smaller group, the game master can accommodate changes in the player dynamics and changes in the tempo of the game simply by adding red herrings, changing the dynamics of a fight scene into a dramatic scene, and such like. And this concept of maintaining focus on what's really important provides a way for the players to feel their agency in the session week over week, and therefore even with a larger group they can feel that what they're doing really matters. And that's really quite important when you're dealing with larger groups. The players need to feel like there is agency in what they're doing, and they're not having to wait around for somebody else to act. Alrighty, so the final thing I need to talk about in terms of the larger games is to look for the off-ramps. When you have a large group, 6, 8, 10, 16, 24, when your group gets to the point where they become virtually untenable, look for ways for the games group to maintain its continuity and its coherency while looking for ways to destructure your large groups and create multiplicities of smaller ones. One of these ways is through scheduling. Generally speaking, a large group is hard to maintain in terms of people's ability to make every session. So it becomes natural to want to take 3 or 4 people who are better suited for Fridays and move them to a Friday, perhaps from your regular Thursday game, simply because it's easier to handle. Conversely, it might be the situation where the players of a certain group want to actually stay in a local community and discover more things about the local population. Maybe they are wanting to explore some ruins or investigate the details of a library, or maybe they want to get involved in local crime solving. Whatever it is, the means by which the players want to take themselves apart and restructure, take advantage of those, because it makes it more fluid, more easy for you to accomplish, and provides the players with the feeling that what they're doing really matters to the games group. Alrighty, so I have concluded what I wanted to in this episode. I want to thank you for being here. If you haven't yet, like I said, click all the buttons down below and become part of our community. If you want to know more information about how you can become a player in our group, check out patreon.com/Nikos. We do have games on Fridays and Fridays and Sundays that are Patreon supporters only, and it's a great way for you to become a part of what we are doing and actually get a chance to be a player in our games. Do realize that Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. and 11 p.m. I'm here on Twitch, and then I translate those episodes to YouTube as I can, generally day by day. And also realize that Friday we only broadcast in the morning at 10 a.m. and then the evenings is one of our role play groups through our Discord channel. So become a part of our Patreon, therefore gaining access to our Discord, and you can actually play along with us. I want to thank you for being here for today, and I hope to see you again in another episode. Let's keep them rolling. Talk to you soon.